Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Gourevitch. I'm an emeritus professor here at UCSD, whose library is there behind me in the screen. And I'm very happy to be participating in this project, which is our UCSD Emeritus Association project to do visual oral histories of our major faculty members and to try to introduce you to them and to record for eternity them and the history of our campus and the contribution that they've made and helped through that process to understand the growth of our campus. And I'm very excited today because I'm getting to interview one of the real most important people in the history of our campus, because he is one of the first people to come to this campus. He came in 1963, I think, and he was one of the founders of, I think, one of the most important departments in this campus, which is the biology department, which is one of the giant departments here, and helped found this university and made it the great institution it is today. And that is Mel Green. And let me just say a couple things about Mel Green, so that we have his name for the record. Mel Green got his BS in chemistry from the University of Pittsburgh in 1958, and a PhD in biochemistry.
It's 1955.
Okay, then somebody's got it wrong in your Dixon Award, which is what I'm reading from. So that's good that you've got a correction there right off the bat. Mel Green has found a mistake.
Now, maybe it was right. Maybe it was 1958. How do you expect an old man like me to remember?
I don't think most of the people listening to this are going to really turn and debate. They're not going to turn off because it was 55 versus 58.
It was 58.
It was the late 50s, and it was chemistry for the University of Pittsburgh, and then you got a PhD in biochemistry to the University of Illinois in 1962. And then you spent a year as a postdoc at Caltech, and you became the 5th member and the first of the biology department here at UCSD and the first molecular biologist here. And your primary research interest was in the area of gene regulation and viral causation of cancer and AIDS chemotherapy. And I think what I'm reading from, because I'm not going to memorize all this, I thought I better have something useful in front of me to read it from. I am reading from the 2013 Dixon Award that you got, and that is a very prestigious award. That is a piece of honor, which is given by our Emeritus Association to people who have achieved a great deal in their careers here and in their Emeritus Association, because not only did Mel do a lot in his career at UCSD, but he did a lot as an emeritus, and he helped create the Emeritus Association itself, and he helped create a mentors program, which is extremely important. It was the first mentors program, I think, at the whole University of California, and a very important institution that we have here in our Emeritus Association. But I think the danger here is that if I go on and list all the things that you've done, Mel, we will never get around to talking about you. It'll only be me reading. And I don't want to do that. I want to start talking about you, and we can get to these various things that you did. So what I'm very fascinated by about you is that when you came here, this was a very empty place. I think, not sure that building behind me existed at the time, but it was a very empty place. And I'd really like to, now it's a very famous, important institution and quite well known. I'd like to know more about your thoughts about how did you decide to come to such an empty place? It was a daring thing to do, I think, to come to a fairly unknown at the time institution to help build this extraordinary biology department on an amazing campus. Could you reflect on what made you make that decision? Why did you decide to come to such an unknown place at that time?
Well, thank you, Peter, for that very flattering introduction. I think you've covered just about everything, but I'll try to answer this question. I was at Caltech as a postdoc, and had only been there for a few months, 4 months, when the word got out that my advisor, Renato Del Becco, who went on a few years later to win a Nobel Prize, was leaving Caltech and coming to the newly established Salk Institute in La Jolla. Um, so I had to find a job pretty quick. I'd only been there a few months, and to my amazement, my phone started ringing, and my first job offer came on the spot from UCLA, um, but it was a department of zoology, and I had no interest in zoology. So, um, about that time, I attended a conference at Lake Arrowhead, uh, not too far from Pasadena, just north of San Bernardino. And at that conference, the annual genetics conference of the West Coast, David Bonner, our first chairman of biology, was in attendance, along
The
with
first chairman of biology here at UCSD.
here at UCSD.
Yeah,
He was the founder of our biology department,
right.
and he was there with two other faculty members and a couple graduate students. And he told me about UCSD, and he told me that he wanted to hire the person who had been my thesis advisor at the University of Illinois, Ben Hall, who was the discoverer of messenger RNA.
Uh-huh.
Well, we were sitting around having drinks after the session, and Bonner told me that, and I don't know whether I was feeling the whiskey or not, but I said to him, Ben Hall has already accepted a position at the University of Washington, and Dave said, "Oh, that's okay. We'll get him to change his mind. No problem." Dave was a very boisterous, arrogant kind of a guy, although just a wonderful person. We'll get him to change his mind. And I said, "No." I must have been feeling the whiskey. I said, "No, Ben never changes his mind, but I know the next best person you can get, me."
Well, good for you. That's
Yeah,
a nice daring thing to say. Yeah.
that was a Saturday night. On Monday, I was back at Caltech and got a phone call from one of the other four members of the biology department, Stan Mills. He said, "You were right. Ben won't change his mind. We'll take you." So that's was the offer.
That's a very charming story.
They invited me to come down for a seminar. I drove from
So
Pasadena.
how does that work? If you forgive my interrupting you, it sounds to me, I would guess that they make the job offer. He says, no, I won't come, but why don't you ask Mel Green?
No,
He recommends you,
he
no?
didn't say that.
What did
I
he say?
he said that. I think it was my saying I was the next best person they could
I
get.
got it. Okay.
I don't know. Who knows? But it
Who
didn't
knows?
take long, 2 days, and they were
Well,
calling
no, but
me
I mean,
down for
those
a
things,
seminar.
I didn't mean that to insult you in any way. I just
No, of
meant that
course.
he thought a great deal of you. I mean, I think the way these things work is that one eminent person recommends another eminent person, and that's how the world works. That's how you discover that. That's
I
how
was
you
just a
build
postdoc. I was
reputation
not
in this.
eminent yet.
Anyway, anyway, so they offered the job to you.
Yeah.
Great.
Um, and then they wanted me to come for a seminar.
Uh-huh.
I said, "Why do I have to come for a seminar? You just heard me talk."
Uh-huh.
He said, "It's just a formality. The job offer is yours. You have the job, but it's just a formality. You have to come and give a seminar."
Uh-huh.
I remember driving from Caltech down Highway 101. I think there were two stop signs all the way. It was
Uh-huh.
so deserted, so beautiful. Um, and I'll never forget arriving at Scripps Oceanography, which is where our biology department was temporarily housed before Bonner Hall had been built.
Mhm.
So I got to Scripps and found the building, and I was reading the seminar notice. Mel Green is going to talk a little bit about lambda. I guess Stan Mills picked that title. And I'm reading that notice, and all of a sudden I see that my seminar is scheduled for noon and it's 12:30. And just then Bonner and the entire department come running down the hall, the entire department consisting of three other faculty members and a handful of students, graduate students. And there he is, Bonner shouted. And he gets to me and he says, "Do you realize you're late for your seminar?" I said, "Well, I thought all seminars started at 4 o'clock. And when Dr. Mills called me, he didn't tell me what time it was." Bonner turns to Mills and says, "Mills, you muttonhead." And that's the way Bonner was. And with that kind of introduction, it's no wonder I wanted to come to UCSD. It was so laid back and so beautiful and so empty. And there was that beautiful beach with no one on it here in February. Uh, it was just too much to pass up. Coming from Illinois and Pittsburgh, where the weather wasn't exactly to my liking,
No, I can
sure I
imagine.
would love it here, and I
Yes.
certainly did.
And so what do you remember your activities were in those days? One of the things about coming to a place like that in a new institution, what you probably have to do everything. There's nobody else to do the work. Nobody to share it with. You do everything. What did you do?
Well, Bonner said, "Don't get involved with university politics."
Uh-huh.
He said, "Just get started working in the lab." And so the first year I didn't have any teaching, but the second year um, I had we started enrolling undergraduates. I had to create a biology lab course,
Uh-huh.
which meant training some of the TAs to do the experiments and help out and ordering all the supplies and all the equipment and everything. It was a big
Uh-huh.
job. And the other thing I had to do was teach a graduate course to my choosing, whatever I wanted. Uh, that was very appealing. I decided to teach virology. We had 8 students in that course, and one of them was a fellow who did his uh, PhD thesis research with me by the name of Susumu Tonegawa, who a few years later went on to win a Nobel Prize.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the kind of place it was at that time.
Yeah.
Brilliant students, fun faculty members in biology, and a beautiful environment.
But you remember having to teach both undergraduates and graduate students, both, huh?
Yeah.
Both kinds of students. Yeah.
I had to create the courses too. There were no textbooks in virology. I had to uh, find literature for them to read. And it was a very interesting course. The students presented what they had read that week. I assigned students one a week to present a talk about some research paper that I had selected. And then we discussed it.
Right. And there were no Xeroxes and there was no computer to just look it up online. You had to find it and somebody had to copy it, or I don't know what they did. What did you copy it? I don't even remember what you did back then.
I think we had faxes to copy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you remember having a preference? Did you like graduate courses more than undergraduate courses, or was that the same for you, or?
Well, the let's see. The first undergraduate course I taught was not until I came back from my first sabbatical.
Mhm.
I went on sabbatical after during my 7th year to London, spent a year there. And when I came back, the new chairman, Bonner, had died just before the building was completed, December of 64. I think he died in September, a couple months before we moved into Bonner Hall, which was December of 1964.
Mhm.
So I came back from the sabbatical in 71, I think it was. And then in 72, gave my first big Bio 1 300 student undergraduate student course.
Mhm.
Um, and that was a general biology course. Um, Um, that was very scary for me because, mind you, I was a chem major. I had never even studied Mendelian genetics,
Mhm.
and I had to teach it. So I was
Mhm.
learning as we went along.
Mhm.
It was fun.
But you like that? Did you like that? Did you like I mean, a big undergraduate course is a very different experience. Teaching brilliant Nobel Prize potential grad students is very different than talking to 300 undergraduates. It's a
It
very
was
different
scary.
experience. So what did you think of that? What did you
Yeah,
think
it was
about that?
scary. My first time
Yeah,
putting together all these lectures and everything,
yeah,
it was a new experience and quite scary at first.
scary.
But um, you know, everything came into place.
Yeah. And then did you get to do that course more than once, or did you keep
Oh
changing
my
courses
God.
all the time?
I got to do that course until I retired in 2001.
Wow,
Along with it, I created about 10 other courses.
wow.
Yeah. So I
That's a
loved
lot of work.
teaching. It was a lot of fun putting, um, I had been under the influence of the founder of molecular biology who was at Caltech, a man by the name of Max Delbruck. And
Uh-huh,
and Max liked teaching new courses. He said, that's the way you learn.
uh-huh,
So I followed his influence and
uh-huh,
um, put together a lot of new courses, including the molecular basis of disease,
uh-huh,
where I invited experts in various diseases from around San Diego to come and give lectures, and then I would discuss them with the students. And
uh-huh.
that started out with 25 students, and in 2 years was over 400.
Wow. But you were the principal teacher of that material, or were the other people then started to share it with you?
I invited the speakers.
You did the teaching, or you found the
No,
speakers?
I didn't do any teaching per se. All I
Uh-huh,
did was invite the speakers and then discuss the lectures with the students.
I see.
That was kind of a new way of teaching undergraduates,
Yeah.
but the pre-meds love that course.
Uh-huh.
Hmm. So,
But these were UCSD undergrads. Many of them headed to medical school. As you said, they were pre-meds and sort of, yeah.
mhm.
Mhm.
And that course for sure.
In that course, yeah.
Molecular basis of disease.
Yeah,
Uh,
right. That would attract pre-meds, yes. I could see that would be,
I gave a course to Extension around that time, back
uh-huh,
in the 70s, called Biology and the Future of Man, where
uh-huh,
I invited people like Renato Del Becco from the Salk and
uh-huh,
Jonas Salk himself came and talked about polio and his discoveries. And I had a great time putting together courses,
mhm,
but I didn't do all the lecturing, that's for
mhm,
sure.
mhm.
Mm.
And did you get a chance to do much? That sounds like it's a lot of work. Did you get a chance to do much of your own research in
Of
that?
course,
Yeah.
we
What
had
did
to
you
do
do research
research if
on
we
those
wanted to
days?
get promoted.
Yeah.
Uh,
So what did you get to do research on in those days?
well, my research always concerned viruses in one way or another, almost always.
Uh-huh,
Um, I at Caltech with Delbecco, I was studying the polyoma virus,
uh-huh,
uh, which caused cancer
right.
in rodents. And my main goal, I think, was to understand how cancer was caused and eventually come up with a cure for cancer. Um,
Uh-huh,
eventually, I I turned from bacterial viruses to viruses like polyoma that cause cancer, and uh, and I think probably my main discovery involved um, the the discovery of viral chromatin.
uh-huh,
The structure of chromatin had never been discovered yet, and Um, it exists, of course, in all eukaryotic cells, cells with a nucleus.
Uh-huh.
But people tried to discover the structure, and when they broke the cells open, the chromatin would be like chewing gum. It would stick together, and you
Uh-huh.
couldn't get it soluble enough to take an electron micrograph. So
Uh-huh.
people didn't know the structure of chromatin. But
Uh-huh.
with polyoma, this small virus, the chromatin was soluble, and you
Uh-huh.
could get an electron micrograph and see that it consisted of one DNA molecule with these balls of protein are wrapped surrounding the circle. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and that was the structure of chromatin.
And so
From
you could get a structure of it, I see.
from that,
Uh-huh.
I said, hey, if if chromatin is all you have with the virus, never pure naked DNA, it's all
Mm.
every molecule in the cell was in the form of this chromatin. Maybe if we change the structure of the protein, instead of the DNA, we might be able in a cell to inhibit cell replication
Mm.
and thereby block cancer cells from dividing. And
Mm.
I published that in 1980 with our director of the Cancer Center as my collaborator, John Mendelsohn.
Oh, yeah, I remember John Mendelsohn.
Hmm.
Right.
Went
He
on to,
went off to Houston, as I recall. He went to
well,
MD
first MD first, yeah, that was MD Anderson, but first
MD
he
Anderson.
went to Sloan Kettering in New
Oh,
York.
yeah, he went to Sloan Kettering. Oh, that's right. That's right.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
So I think research played a very important role in my career.
Uh-huh.
But as the career developed, as as I aged, I
Uh-huh.
got more and more interested in teaching and forming relationships with students um, and I think eventually um, I stopped doing research altogether.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you're aware, from 1994 to 1999, 5 years,
Uh-huh.
I was the director of the academic enrichment programs
Uh-huh.
at the same time as being full-time faculty. So I
And
had
so tell us about that. What did that involve?
that involved two full-time jobs.
Mhm.
um, Joe Watson was the vice chancellor of student affairs,
Yes, I
and
remember. Yeah.
he appointed me to that
Uh-huh.
position. And it was very enjoyable helping students find um, find research programs for the most part in
Mhm.
every department on the campus.
Mm.
Again, it was a lot of work with first generation students and
Uh-huh.
minority students.
Right. And so what was your, so say more about what your role in it and what did you do specifically in that program?
Well, I was the director,
Hmm.
so we had two um, people working under me. Um, we we had to first of all advertise the program because it was the best kept secret on campus. The previous director, Mary Freifeld, uh, uh, just to give you an example of how secretive the program was, she kept a cloth cover over her glass window so nobody could see her. That was the first thing I did was remove that cover and
Hmm.
start advertising the program on campus.
Hmm.
Also brought in some grant money from National Science Foundation um, and really helped build that program up, I think.
Hmm.
Mhm. So
I know that you were
basically,
very involved in
let me
creating
just
grant.
interrupt.
Yeah,
Let me just explain that program a little bit further.
go ahead, please.
There are many students at UCSD who would like to do some form of undergraduate research.
Hmm.
And quite often, they are either too shy to approach a faculty member, or
Mhm.
in many cases, the faculty member has a full load already, a full program. It doesn't want any more students. And after one or two interviews, the students get turned off. Um, the academic enrichment program has a list of faculty who want students from every department. And so it makes it much easier to help a student get into a research program.
Mhm.
Does that explain it a
Yeah, that,
little better?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, but I mean, I think that the part that I don't quite, you maybe just say a little bit more, but how does it do that? How does it make it easier?
Well, you have a faculty member who wants a student.
Mhm.
So the student goes and he looks at the file and he sees so and
Got it,
so is doing this, and he describes the research he's doing. The student right away knows if he's interested in that
got it.
or not. Then he can go and interview the faculty member.
So it's a matching process. You get the faculty member to describe her or his
Exactly.
need, and then the student can go through and look through these descriptions and find something that fits her or him. Yeah, that sounds great.
I'm so old, I still don't say him and her. I keep
You don't
saying,
say him and her. That's modern world.
yeah.
You don't say, I notice I didn't say they, but I could say they also. Um, and so I wonder what you also played an extremely important role in creating the mentor program. And maybe you could describe that to us a little bit. I think that's after you retired and you joined the Emeritus Association, you played a very big role in developing that. Maybe you could explain that for the record for us so that we can understand that and how that seems to be the way you've described your career, that would be a natural fit for you to come up with that idea and do it. So maybe you could explain that.
I'd love to. As far as I'm concerned, it's probably the most important thing I did during my entire 60 years at UCSD.
That's a pretty big statement.
I retired in 2001,
Mm-hmm.
and after having spent 5 years as director of academic enrichment, I still wanted to be involved with the um, student affairs program. Um, and so I was volunteering in student affairs. They had an assistant vice chancellor, Lauren Thompson was his name, I recall. And um, he told me he was writing a grant to the Howard Hughes program, the Howard Hughes Foundation. And I helped him write that grant. And and when we submitted it for about $2 million, this was back in 2005. Um, I gave him an outline of what I thought the director should be doing. And 2 days later, he invited me to be the director.
Mm.
This is several years after I retired. So from 2006 till '09, I was director of the Howard Hughes Scholars Program, which was basically designed in two parts. One, to help undergraduates at UCSD um, succeed as in their intentions to become biomedical researchers. And two, to go out to high schools and junior colleges and give talks and recruit students, undergraduate, underrepresented students to go into the
What a
biomedical.
great idea. So you got the students to go out to other schools
Yeah.
and try to persuade students to follow in their footsteps. And
It was my staff,
yeah,
2 members of the staff who were working with me.
I see. That's great.
So that was a two-part program, and during that time, I was walking on the campus one day and passed UC 400, a Quonset hut, a former Marine Quonset hut, and
Mhm.
sitting on the porch was a woman by the name of Susan Chaffee,
Oh, yeah,
and she had
Suzanne,
cookies.
Suzanne Chaffee, right, yeah.
So, of course, seeing the cookies, I stopped by and talked to her about what she was doing there. And that's where mind you, I had retired in '01, and this was '06, 5 years later. I had not heard of the Retirement Association that she was directing. So she told me about that and told me also that there was an Emeritus Association, which I joined immediately. And and then with my experience with the Howard Hughes Scholars Program, I got the idea of the mentors, uh, the emeriti serving as mentors um, for underrepresented students, first generation. I myself was a first generation student, um, growing up in Pittsburgh. Um, I didn't go away to college. I stayed home, and my dad um, was an immigrant from Poland. After uh, finishing the third grade, he went to work in a steel mill, and so I was
Mhm.
quite familiar with being a first generation, um, relatively low income student. Um, so I got the idea of using of starting a mentor program using students from the Howard Hughes Scholars Program as the mentees. And I told this to Suzanne, and she liked the idea. Um, I there was a table at the faculty club called the Bob Table. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No, I don't know about the Bob table.
No. Well, at that table were about six senior citizens. Um, One of them was Bob Mosher, the architect
Oh,
of
yes, I remember Bob Mosher, yes. The
uh,
architect, the
the
guy, for those of you who don't, the guy who designed the bridge that goes from San Diego to Coronado
Coronado.
Island,
Yeah,
amongst his other things, that's one of them.
yes.
Yes,
Well, Bob invited me to come and
uh-huh,
have lunch at that table.
yes,
And at that table was Herb York, our
yes.
first chancellor.
I
Although
remember
not a
her,
Bob,
yes,
he was there.
yeah.
And told Herb this idea. I said, "Can we have your support for
Uh-huh.
this idea of a mentor program?" He said, "Yes, count me in." Well, that very week, um, we had a new chancellor giving a talk on the Revelle Stonehenge lawn. That was, what's her name? Marianne Fox?
Oh,
No,
yes, Mary Ann Fox.
I can't remember. It
Yeah,
might have been Marianne Fox.
yeah, that's the first, yes, it would be Mary Ann Fox, yes. Hmm.
Well, she gave a talk, and right after her talk, I went up to her and I said, we have this idea of starting an emeritus mentor program, but we don't have any financial support for it whatsoever. Uh, what do you think about the idea? She said, count me in. Just like that. I said, oh, I also said Herb York is behind it. So um, she said, well, you can count on my support. So then I
Yeah,
met Jack Fisher, the president of the um, Emeritus Association, and he thought this was a great idea. And he took the ball and really went with it, getting us established with Suzanne as a director. And it
that's
led
great.
to before this, before the mentor program, do you know what the Emeriti Association did?
I had no idea,
No idea. This is now 2000, what did I say? 2006.
something like that.
Um, I joined it and discovered all they did was once a month have a lecture with tea and coffee being served.
Yeah.
That was it. They had no space. They had nobody assisting the program.
Uh-huh.
So Suzanne Chaffee and Jack Fisher deserve most of
Yes.
the credit for making
Yes.
this thing.
Yeah, they are the key people that made it one of the best programs in the best of its kind in the system.
You bet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, right.
I had the idea, but it
Yeah.
really took
But
Suzanne.
it broadened out, just for the record, you started it out as a program for biology to develop interest in biology, but it's not restricted to that. It now goes to all first year students who receive a particular kind of fellowship. I
Yes.
think what you did is you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you linked it to the idea that a certain kind of student gets a fellowship, and all those people get a mentorship that goes with that. They are to be mentored into what it's like to become a first year undergraduate, because they're bright and they've done well to get in here, but they lack family background and experience of what it's like to go to college.
Mhm.
And so this is a program which helps them learn what that's all about. And
I
I think
it
that's a
helped
wonderful
them feel
idea.
comfortable
Yeah,
talking to a faculty member, and
right.
I think that's so important.
That's right. And that is something which was actually very, very poorly understood when universities began broadening the idea that we're going to go beyond fancy people of fancy backgrounds and broadening the pool of who was getting into college, that they weren't taking realization that it wasn't just enough to be a good student and graduate from high school
Right.
and get good grades. You had to learn there was something to be learned about what it's like to go to school and what that was. And so I think that was an excellent idea that you all had, that we should be mentoring them and helping them learn what that's all about. So
Let me give you an
thank
example in my own
you.
experience.
Yeah.
Thank you. When I started undergraduate school at the University of Pittsburgh,
Mhm.
I had no mentors, no advisors.
Mhm.
I didn't know that faculty at a university did research.
Mhm.
I thought they just taught. I,
Right,
I had no idea who did research.
right,
I went to school with the idea of becoming a high school teacher because
right,
that's what I knew. And
right,
that's the thing that first generation low income students don't have the experience.
right,
There's no one telling them about
right,
the world out there.
right,
They know what's in their books, and that's about
right,
it.
right.
Maybe it's better now than I'm sure it is. The word mentor didn't exist when I was a
No,
student.
no.
Well, it didn't exist in my vocabulary.
I mean, do you find that when you talk to people out there in the non-university world, how good an idea do people have about what universities are about, what goes on there?
Yeah.
Some people understand it, many people do not. This idea what research is not a very well understood. I don't think very well understood. I think what's not very well understood is how hard, I'm always struck at how hard people work. The researchers at a place like UCSD work very, very hard.
Mhm.
They're very, very hard workers. To be at a graduate university like this one, which is very competitive with the big universities of the world, these are very hardworking people. And what you have to do to teach in the classroom and to get the kind of research to face up to all these committees that look at your promotion and appointments and all these things, that's very hard work. It's a lot of work. So it's very impressive.
Mhm.
And well, so that's one of the fascinating things to me. I go back to the thing that we started out talking with, is that I'm very fascinated by the decisions and the choices that you made in your career to come to a new institution like ours, because um, most people liked going to established ones.
Yeah.
Ohio State, I mean, not just the famous, fancy, rich ones, but the great public universities of America, which I think are extraordinary places, Berkeley, UCLA, UCSD, they're amazing. And the amazing thing about UCSD is it managed a bunch of years to become
Yeah.
like UCLA and Berkeley but Ohio State, Wisconsin, Michigan, those are amazing institutions. And
I just had the feeling, though, that this was going to become a great place. And
you had that feeling from the beginning.
from the beginning,
Yeah.
that this was going to become a great place.
Mm.
Um, I didn't know anything about David Bonner. I didn't know anything about his research
Uh-huh.
or any member of the biology department, the other three members. I didn't know John Singer from Adam,
Mhm.
but I just the idea of coming to a new university that was going to be part of the University of California.
Mhm.
I mean, for example, Jonas Salk, not Jonas, Renato Del Becco
Mhm.
invited me to run his lab instead of taking the job at UCSD. And why didn't I do that?
Yeah.
the I I didn't know what the Salk was going to become.
Mhm.
I knew I could do research there, but there was no teaching to be done there.
Yeah.
Who knew whether it would succeed or fail or
Right.
but uh, I knew that the University of California was a well-established institution.
Right.
And if I, like Bonner said to me, you do well in your first couple of years here and you're going to get tenure.
Mhm.
Well, do you think I knew what tenure meant?
Mhm.
I didn't even know what tenure was. But I think it was purely intuitive. I just had this feeling that UCSD was going to be a great place. The first
Mhm.
person I met when I came, uh, the very first day, we were located at Scripps Oceanography,
Yes.
and we went. There was a little cafeteria there on the lawn. The
Oh, yeah.
entire university, all the secretaries, all the graduate students, all the faculty had lunch on this lawn. There
Yes.
would be what, 30 of them or something, 50, I don't know,
Mhm.
not many. The first person I met was Harold Urey.
Mhm.
Harold Urey was a big name, right?
Mhm.
And I'll never forget that. Uh, I said to him, Harold, you're the very first person I've met outside of biology here at UCSD. Uh, I
Mhm.
just came from Caltech and I was friends with your son John at Caltech.
Mhm.
He said, well, which way was I going when you stopped me? This way or that way? I said, this way. He said, oh, good, then I've had lunch. And he left. I mean, it's, these are the kind of experiences that
Yeah, yeah, that's a
are
very
just
charming story. That's a
wonderful. You never forget them. It
yeah,
makes it
yeah,
makes my life here at the university
yeah.
just so
Yeah.
incredibly wonderful.
That's a very interesting story. Yeah,
Um, I could tell stories like that all day.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, so that you're proud of. I'm very fascinated that you're very proud of of all the things that you did. You're very proud of creating the mentor program. That's a very interesting reminiscence to have because it puts to me it puts together a lot of your features. A lot of the things that fascinated you when you reflect on your life of being the first in your family to go to college and how strikingly different that was from experiences that you had had in the family, and that it was something that after you retired, it was something you wanted to help communicate to other people and have them share that experience. I think that's very moving. I think that's a very fascinating thing to have done. And working with Suzanne Chofi and Jack Fisher, I think that's a great thing to have done. That's a nice achievement to have
I
worked with them.
think being a first generation
Yeah,
college student myself
yeah,
played a very major role in my relationship with students.
Yes.
Um, it it I it really became more important to me than
Yes.
even the research I did,
Yeah.
um, and um, I think I had my share of nice discoveries. I've been
Mm-hmm.
invited all over the world to give seminars, and that's a wonderful fringe benefit of being a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Getting the chance to meet
Mm-hmm.
so many brilliant people and wonderful people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's a real fringe benefit that I never dreamed existed as
Yeah.
as a high school student, even as a
Mm-hmm.
college student. I had no idea what it would be like. I thought I would get a job uh, in biochemistry at some industry and spend the rest of my life trying to synthesize some chemical that would maybe
Yes.
cure cancer or cure something. I had no idea what academia really was like.
Right.
Mm.
Well, I think you chose to see it. You chose to see these different things about it. Not everyone does. Not, you're, I
With a
mean,
good mentor.
don't undersell the part which is distinctively you. I would say that it's Mel Green, that many people go through these experiences and don't see all the opportunities and don't see the various complicated pieces of it that
But
I
there
think
was so much
you see.
there was so much luck in my life.
Yes,
That's
sure.
I think I don't know if you believe in luck, but
I do,
I
but
was ready to leave the University of Illinois
yeah.
after 1 year because there was nobody there doing virus research.
Mhm.
I told the chairman of the department, he said, "Wait, we just hired a man, Ben Hall. Go and talk to him before you leave." Okay? He came without doing postdoctorate work. He had a PhD in physical chemistry from Harvard. Nothing
Mhm.
to do with viruses that I wanted to work with. But the chairman said he's going to work in collaboration with a microbiologist, Saul Spiegelman, and they are going to work on viruses that infect bacteria.
Mhm.
Oh, viruses, great. So I went to see Ben Hall, and uh, to this day, it's like yesterday. I remember it so vividly. He was a giant of a man, stood up, and I thought he was going to crush my hand, but he was very gentle. It turned out, I found out he was a guard in football for the University of Kansas. Then he
Wow,
went to Harvard to get a PhD in physical chemistry. Now,
wow.
I'm a sports nut. I love football, baseball, tennis, hockey, you name it. I'm a sports nut. And I heard this guy played guard for the University of Kansas, went on to get a PhD in physical chemistry. That's the man for me. Well, it turned out he goes on in 1 year to discover messenger RNA. And that virtually made my career. I was his only student for the entire 3 years that I did research with him. And he was just so good to me. He was my first and only mentor.
Hmm. That's
He said when
fantastic.
I was going to write my PhD
Uh-huh.
thesis, uh, he said, "What are you going to do after you leave here?" I said, "It's only been 2.5 years. I guess I'll go teach in a small college somewhere." He said, "What?" He said, "You can always go back to research, to teaching, but you can't go back to research. Do some postdoctorate work." So I ended up at Caltech. I didn't even know that Caltech was such a famous place,
Uh-huh.
but it had a man that was doing work on cancer viruses.
Mhm.
And so one thing led to the next.
Yeah, you asked me if I believe in luck, and I do, but I believe that there are opportunity takers, luck takers. In other words, luck arrives, but everybody has some luck, but not everybody takes it. You
Yeah.
I mean you describe moments of kind of a whip snazzy sense of humor late to your own job talk and things like that, and or saying things, slightly daring, but they're revelatory of somebody who takes advantage of luck. To me, that's how I would describe you. Slightly impudent in a endearing way, and that they make people pay attention to you. Your advisors, Bonner, all these other people, there's something there worth noticing. It's not just a wise guy. They notice what the difference between a wise guy and a bright wise guy is noticeable. I would say,
Are you saying I'm a wise guy?
no, you're a bright wise guy.
Right, wise guy.
Yeah. I don't know you well enough to say that, Mel. I don't even know if you are a wise guy. Maybe that's not right. But I mean, you're describing yourself doing slightly daring things.
I would
And
say I had more chutzpah than brains.
yeah, you had chutzpah, and so, but you also had brains. But you had brains, but you also did things. You also did honorable things. I mean, you came up with good ideas. You did. So you described to me somebody who did a lot of work. All that teaching. There's a lot of people out there, they'll teach one class and then they'll insist on doing it for 10 years so they don't have to do another set of preparations. Well, the guy who's willing to teach a lot of different classes is a guy taking on a great deal of what we call public goods. They need these things done and you do it. So, well, people notice that and they respect you for it and they admire you for it. And I didn't even ask you one of the questions that I was curious about. What's it like to recruit all these people? If you're in a tiny department like that, which is growing so big, you're recruiting a lot of people. Well, that's a whole other experience. Recruiting people, what's it like to meet them? The world, there's a difference between people that you want to have around you as opposed to people you can read their stuff, but you don't really want to have them here. And that's a very interesting and important thing. Who do you really want to have around you? Who do you want to have down the hall? Who do you want to have to talk to? Who helps you when you're talking about an idea and it's stimulating, as opposed to who do you not really want to have around because you don't really like talking to that person? Those are very interesting differences. And I think great departments build up because there are people making those decisions who are wise to understand that distinction. And that's a big part of building these terrific departments, I think, personally.
Can I tell you a story about recruiting?
Yeah, sure.
I was in my first year here,
Yeah.
and I said to David Bonner, I had a friend back at the University of Illinois when I was a graduate student who worked in the same lab as I did, by the name of Masaki Hayashi, a Japanese boy, doing his PhD thesis. And I heard that he's going to be finishing soon and maybe going into developmental biology. What do you think about recruiting him for our department? Dave looked at me and said, "Why aren't you on the phone?" That was how he talked and how impulsive he was. That was a good idea. Get on the phone and do it. And so Masaki came to our department. He was the first person I recruited.
But he thought it was a good idea. I mean, he had judgment. That wasn't a flip comment.
Oh, he knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing.
Dave created a wonderful department.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. Right.
He died, shortly after coming here of Hodgkin's disease.
Hodgkin's disease.
Yeah.
That's sad.
He was given, he came from Yale.
Yeah.
And he brought 3 faculty with him, John Singer, Stan Mills, and Jack DeMoss. I was the first one he hired that he didn't bring with him. And Masaki Hayashi, I think, was the second. Yeah, Dave liked Japanese people. And in fact, how did we get our Nobel laureate, Susumu Tanagawa? Dave contacted a friend of his in Tokyo, told him he was starting up a new department. Did he have any great graduate students to recommend? And that's how we got Susumu Tanagawa to come to UCSD.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Mel, I
I could tell you stories all night.
I know we could go on for a long time, and I think we have filled up, believe it or not, we filled up a whole hour of this.
Have we already?
Yes, we have filled up an hour, and I've enjoyed it a great deal. Found it quite interesting, stories that I didn't know about on the campus. And I've enjoyed it greatly, and so I think we've got recorded a little bit for history some of Mel Green's best stories.